Zara sat by the window of her small home, gazing out at the barren landscape. The sun had just begun to set, casting long shadows over the rocky terrain of the alien world. It was a world that had once seemed so full of promise, but now it felt nothing more than an endless expanse of isolation. Her home was neat and tidy, filled with strange but beautiful objects from her travels, but there was one thing that was missing: the warmth of company. Her husband, Sadler, had been gone for months on a diplomatic mission, and though their marriage had been arranged by their families, she had always believed in the idea of love. But after all this time, she was left with nothing but a hollow feeling. The days dragged on, each one blending into the next, filled with the same chores, the same routines, and the same silence. She had no one to talk to. Her husband, despite his intelligence and high rank in the Alien Council, had always been emotionally distant. They had never shared their deepest thoughts or emotions. Their union had been built on duty, not love, and though Zara respected him, she longed for something more, a connection, a bond that went beyond mere appearances. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Zara found herself growing more and more restless. She wandered the quiet halls of her home, dusting and organizing, as though it might somehow fill the empty space in her heart. But nothing seemed to work. She missed laughter. She missed warmth. She missed someone to share her life with. Zara had tried to busy herself with learning about the human culture that had recently come into contact with the alien world. Their language was strange, and their customs even stranger, but there was something about their emotions, their openness, that intrigued her. Humans didn't hide their feelings. They expressed love, loss, joy, and sorrow with such raw honesty that it was both beautiful and terrifying. She wondered if humans could teach her what it meant to truly connect with someone. Could they show her a way to fill the emptiness that had grown in her heart? Her days were often filled with the sound of her own voice as she spoke aloud in the human tongue, practicing words she had learned from their books and recordings. The first words she had ever spoken in their language echoed in her mind. "Hello, my name is Zara." She had said them so many times, hoping that one day they would not just be words. She hoped that one day she would speak those words to someone who understood her, someone who could see past the surface and into the depths of her soul. The silence in her home was deafening at times. Zara would sometimes imagine what it would be like to have someone sit across from her, to laugh with them, to share her thoughts and dreams. But as the months passed, that dream felt more and more distant. Her husband was still far away, and Zara began to feel like a stranger in her own life. One evening, as she sat alone, staring out the window, she heard the faint hum of an engine in the distance. The sound was out of place, breaking the stillness of her world. She frowned, wondering if it was just the wind or some passing creature. But the sound grew louder, unmistakable. Something, or someone, was approaching. Zara stood up quickly, her heart racing. It could be a visitor, though it was rare for anyone to come so far out into the barren regions. She rushed outside, her long silken dress flowing behind her, and stood in the doorway, her eyes scanning the horizon. The engine noise continued to grow louder, and soon she saw a small ship descending through the atmosphere. It was not large, nor was it anything extravagant. It appeared to be a simple craft, damaged and struggling to maintain control. The ship made a rough landing not far from her home. The ground trembled slightly as it touched down, sending up a small cloud of dust. Zara felt a mix of curiosity and concern. She had not expected to encounter anyone, and the idea of meeting a stranger, especially someone from another world, was both thrilling and unnerving. With cautious steps, she approached the ship. The door to the craft slowly creaked open, revealing the silhouette of a figure inside. As the figure stepped out, Zara's heart skipped a beat. The person before her was human, a man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing simple clothing that had been worn down by the journey. He looked disoriented, but when his eyes met hers, Zara saw something in them that made her pause. He seemed as lost as she felt, his expression one of confusion and uncertainty. Their gazes locked for a moment, and Zara realized something. She wasn't alone anymore. The man spoke first, his voice hoarse from the journey. I didn't mean to land here," he said, his words slow and careful. "My ship's engine is damaged. I need help." Zara stepped closer, her curiosity getting the better of her. "You are far from your home," she said softly, her voice a mix of surprise and empathy. "But you found shelter." The human nodded, a faint smile on his face. "I'm not sure how I got here, but it seems like I found someone who can help me. Thank you." In that moment, Zara felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Could this stranger, this human, be the companion she had been longing for? She didn't know yet, but for the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. Zara watched the human closely as he stepped out of his ship, dusting himself off and looking around. His movements were slow, as though he was still getting used to the strange gravity of her planet. She could see that he was tired, perhaps from the long journey, but there was a certain resilience in his eyes, something that made Zara curious. She had met many aliens in her time, but never a human. Their kind was a mystery to her, a new discovery in the galaxy. The man, who had introduced himself as David, offered a weary smile as he glanced at the ship, now settled awkwardly on the ground. "I didn't mean to land here," he said, his voice carrying the faintest accent. "My ship. The engine failed. I didn't think I'd end up so far from the main settlement." Zara nodded, stepping forward cautiously. Her eyes lingered on his features, taking in the details of his human form. The way his brown hair fell messily across his forehead, the look of weariness in his eyes, and his clothes, which looked as though they had seen better days. He was not like the usual visitors she had encountered, who were often diplomats or researchers from far-off worlds. David was different. He looked like he was from a different world entirely. "You are far from any settlement," she said, her voice soft and measured. "This is a quiet part of the planet. There is nothing here except the endless hills and mountains." David looked at her with a mixture of confusion and gratitude. "I don't even know how I ended up here. I was on my way to another planet, and I guess I took a wrong turn. Your planet is beautiful, though. Quiet. Peaceful." Zara smiled faintly, though she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. Peaceful, yes, but also lonely. Much too lonely for her. She had spent so much time in solitude that she was beginning to wonder if she would ever experience the kind of connection she had read about in the human stories. The connection that David spoke of, the warmth of companionship. Without thinking, Zara spoke again. You need help with your ship. I can offer shelter until you get it fixed. I live not far from here." David blinked, as if surprised by her offer. It wasn't often that someone would offer assistance to a stranger, especially one from another world. But his instincts told him that Zara wasn't like others he had met. There was something in her eyes, something genuine and kind. "Are you sure?" he asked, still unsure of what to make of the situation. "I don't want to be a burden." "No burden," Zara replied quickly, almost too eagerly. "It is the least I can do. My home is not far. You can rest there. I will see to your ship tomorrow." David hesitated for a moment before nodding, and together they made their way toward her home. As they walked, Zara couldn't help but feel a growing sense of curiosity. She had spent so many years in silence, never talking to anyone except for the occasional servant or delivery person. But now, with David beside her, everything felt different. There was something about his presence, his calm demeanor and his curiosity, that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. As they walked in silence, Zara could sense that David was still processing the situation. His eyes darted around as he looked at the strange alien landscape, his mind working through the unfamiliar sights and sounds. Zara couldn't blame him. It was not every day that you found yourself on a distant planet, far from home, with no clear way back. Finally, David broke the silence. "What's it like here?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. "I've never seen a place like this before. So vast. It feels like there's no end to it." Zira smiled softly. "It is peaceful. It is quiet. There is no noise, no distractions. But it can be lonely." David glanced over at her, sensing the sadness in her voice. He wondered what kind of life she had led here, all alone in this strange world. He had only just met her, but there was something about Zira that drew him in. Something familiar in the way she spoke, in the way her eyes held a depth of emotion he couldn't quite plaque. "I understand," David said after a moment. "Being alone for too long can make a person feel like they're lost. I've been traveling for a while now, and sometimes it feels like I'm the only one out here." Zira's heart gave a little lurch. She could feel the weight of his words, the raw honesty in them. He understood her loneliness. He had been alone too, for reasons unknown to her. It was a strange but comforting thought. For the first time in a long while, Zira felt like she was no longer the only one. When they reached her home, Zira led David inside. The interior was simple but comfortable, with warm colors and soft lighting that made the space feel inviting. There was a small kitchen area where she prepared meals, and a large living space where she spent most of her time. A few decorations from her travels dotted the room, adding a touch of personality to the otherwise calm and serene space. David set down his bag by the door, looking around with curiosity. "This is nice," he said, his voice soft. "It feels warm, like it's more than just a house." Zira smiled, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. "It is my home," she said, "though it's been quiet for a long time." As they sat down to eat, Zira found herself opening up more than she had expected. She asked David about his journey, where he was from, and what had brought him so far from his home. In turn, he asked her about her life, about her world, and about what it was like to live so far from the bustling cities. They shared stories and laughter, and Zira realized how much she had missed the simple act of conversation. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and for the first time in a long while, Zira felt something stir inside her, something that had been dormant for years: hope. As the days passed, Zira found herself growing more comfortable with David's presence. The house, which had once felt cold and silent, now buzzed with conversation, laughter, and even moments of quiet companionship. She had never imagined that a simple human, lost and far from home, would bring such warmth to her life. But there he was, and with each passing day, their connection deepened. David's days were spent trying to repair his ship, but Zira noticed that he never rushed the process. He seemed content to spend time with her, sharing stories about his world, his travels, and the people he had met along the way. She, in turn, shared her own life, the quiet existence she had led in the remote corners of the alien world. Though their lives had been so different, they found common ground in their longing for something more. It was in the evenings after dinner that they would sit together and talk. Sometimes the conversations were light, filled with casual questions and observations. Other times, the talks grew deeper, revealing pieces of themselves they hadn't shared with anyone in years. One evening, as the soft light of the setting sun filled the room, David leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on the stars outside the window. "I've always wondered what it would be like to stay on a planet like this," he said. "It's so quiet here, so peaceful. I think I could get used to it." Zira smiled at his words, though a small twinge of sadness flickered in her chest. "It's quiet, yes," she replied, "but it can also be lonely. I've lived here for so long, and there's hardly anyone to talk to. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one left on this world." David turned his gaze to her, sensing the weight behind her words. He had heard her talk about the isolation before, but tonight there was a sadness in her voice that made him pause. "You don't have to be alone," he said softly, almost as if the words had slipped out without him meaning to say them. Zira blinked, her heart quickening at the sincerity in his voice. She had always been careful not to hope for too much. Hope, she had learned, only led to disappointment. But here was David, offering something she had never expected. A chance to not be alone. I don't know if that's possible, Zyra said quietly. I've always been on my own, even when I wasn't. My husband, he's a good man, but he's always been distant. Our marriage was arranged, and it's been that way for years. There's no real connection between us, not like what you're talking about. David's expression softened as he listened to her, understanding more than she realized. He had never been married, but he knew what it was like to feel disconnected from the people around you. There were times when he, too, had longed for something more than surface-level relationships, something deeper and more meaningful. You deserve more than that, David said quietly. Everyone deserves to feel loved, to feel seen. You don't have to settle for a life of loneliness, Zyra. Zyra's heart fluttered at his words. She had spent so long convincing herself that she didn't need anything more than what she already had. But now, in the quiet of this room, with David's kind eyes fixed on hers, she wondered if maybe there was a chance for something better. Something real. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine it. To imagine a life where she wasn't just an afterthought in someone else's world. A life where she was seen, understood, and loved. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Could it be possible? Could she really ask for more than what life had already given her? I don't know what to say, Zyra admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I never thought I could have something like that. But hearing you say it, it makes me wonder if it's possible. If I could have a life where I'm not just waiting for something to change, but actually living. David smiled softly, his eyes warm with understanding. You can, Zyra. You just have to believe it. You don't have to be alone. Not anymore. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of his words settling between them. Zyra felt a stirring in her chest, a small flicker of hope that had long been buried deep inside her. Could she really have more than the life she had known? Could she have something that was real? I've been thinking, David continued, breaking the silence. You said you've been on your own for a long time. Do you ever think about what it would be like to have someone by your side, someone who would always be there for you? Zyra nodded slowly, her mind racing. The thought had crossed her mind many times, but she had always pushed it aside. After all, it seemed too impossible, too far out of reach. But David's presence, his kindness, made it feel like something real, something that could actually happen. I think about it every day, she admitted. I think about what it would be like to share my life with someone who understands me, who doesn't see me as just a title or a position. But it's hard to imagine. David's eyes softened as he reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. You don't have to imagine it, Zyra. It's possible. You just have to let yourself believe that you deserve it. Zyra stared at their hands, a rush of emotions flooding through her. She had always believed that she was destined to be alone, that her role in life was to serve a purpose, not to experience love or companionship. But now, with David sitting beside her, offering her something she had longed for, it felt like the first real chance at happiness in years. As the evening went on, their conversations grew more personal, their bond deepening in ways neither of them had expected. Zyra found herself laughing more, her heart feeling lighter with every passing moment. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen. And in David's presence, she dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, her life didn't have to be defined by loneliness anymore. The evening was quieter than usual. The stars outside twinkled like distant jewels, casting soft light through the windows of Zyra's home. David sat at the small table, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating his face, but his thoughts were far away. It had been another long day of repairs, and although he had made some progress with his ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Something important. As he glanced over at Zyra, who was quietly organizing a few items on the shelf, he couldn't help but notice the subtle sadness that seemed to linger in her eyes. Zyra hadn't spoken much today, and David could tell that something was weighing heavily on her mind. She had been quieter than usual, her gaze drifting to the window every now and then as if she was lost in thought. Her beautiful pale blue skin seemed to glow in the soft light, but it was her expression that captured David's attention. There was something in her eyes, something that told him she was carrying a burden. Finally, unable to ignore the feeling any longer, David spoke up. "Zyra, is everything all right?" His voice was soft but concerned. Zyra paused in her task, her fingers brushing over the delicate items on the shelf as she took a deep breath. She had wanted to keep her emotions hidden, to avoid showing David just how lonely she truly felt. But tonight, something inside her had shifted. Perhaps it was the warmth of his presence, the kindness he had shown her since the moment they met. Or perhaps it was the fact that she could no longer deny the truth that had been growing inside her for days. She couldn't pretend any longer. Turning to face him, she met his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. "David," she began softly, her voice trembling just a little. "I've been thinking. A lot, actually." David leaned forward slightly, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "About what?" Zyra took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. It wasn't easy for her to be vulnerable, to admit the depth of her feelings, but she knew that she needed to say it. "I've been alone for so long, David," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know it might sound strange, but since you've been here, I felt something I haven't felt in years. I feel seen. I feel like someone understands me for the first time in a long time." David's heart gave a small jolt at her words. He hadn't expected this, but he could see the sincerity in her eyes, the longing that was so clear in her expression. It was a look he had seen before in his own life, that yearning for connection, for love, for something deeper than just passing moments. "I never thought I could ask for more than what I already have," Zyra continued, her voice shaking slightly. "I've lived my life thinking that I was meant to be alone, that this was just how things were. But now, with you here, it's different. I don't want to be alone anymore. I don't want to just be someone's wife by duty, by arrangement. I want to be someone's choice. I want to be loved, David." Her words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, everything was silent. David didn't know what to say. The raw emotion in Zyra's voice, the vulnerability she was showing, made his heart ache for her. He had known that Zyra was lonely, but hearing her speak so openly about it made him realize just how much she had been holding in. Zyra continued, her eyes not leaving his. "I don't expect you to answer right away. I don't even know if it's possible, if someone like me can have a life like that. But I had to ask, David. I had to ask if you would take me as your wife." David blinked in surprise, his mind racing. He hadn't expected this. He had spent so much time thinking about his journey, his own struggles, that he hadn't really stopped to consider what this moment meant for Zyra. She was offering him something real, something genuine, and it took him a moment to process it fully. Zyra, seeing the hesitation in his eyes, quickly looked down, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I didn't mean to make things awkward." No, David quickly interrupted, standing up and walking over to where she stood. "It's not awkward, Zyra. You don't have to apologize." He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, trying to reassure her. "It's just a lot to take in." Zyra nodded, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I understand if it's too much. I didn't expect you to feel the same way. I know we come from different worlds, and I'm just a lonely woman asking for something I might never get." David took a step closer to her, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never expected to be in this situation, but here he was, and for the first time, he could see the depth of Zyra's longing. He couldn't ignore it. He couldn't just walk away. "Zyra," David said softly, his voice firm with conviction, "I didn't come here expecting to find someone like you, but now that I've met you, I can't imagine just leaving without trying to understand what this could be." You're not just asking me for something. You're offering me something, too. A chance at something real. Zaira's heart raced at his words, a flicker of hope lighting up inside her. Could it be possible? Could he really feel the same way? David smiled, the warmth in his expression telling her everything she needed to know. I can't promise what the future holds, Zaira, but I'm willing to take the chance. To see what it means to love, to truly be with someone who isn't just there out of obligation, but because they choose to be. I want that with you. Zaira's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. The relief, the joy that flooded her heart was overwhelming. She had asked for so little, and now, here was someone who was offering her everything she had longed for. With a soft smile, Zaira finally spoke, her voice filled with emotion. Thank you, David. Thank you for not walking away. David took her hand in his, giving it a gentle squeeze. You don't ever have to thank me for this, Zaira. This is what I want to be with you. And in that moment, as they stood together, everything felt possible. Zaira no longer felt alone. And for the first time in a long time, she could see a future filled with love and connection, something she had only ever dreamed of. The days following Zaira's heartfelt plea were filled with a quiet tension that neither of them could escape. David had agreed to stay, to explore the possibility of a future with Zaira, but he couldn't shake the weight of the decision he had made. Every conversation, every shared moment with her, made him feel something he hadn't anticipated, something that both thrilled and terrified him. Zaira had given him everything, her vulnerability laid bare. She had opened her heart to him, asking for something so simple yet so profound. She wanted love. She wanted a life where she was more than just a wife by arrangement. She wanted a life where she mattered. But David, though he cared for her deeply, was still grappling with the enormity of what she had asked. He had never been in a situation like this before. He had known relationships, brief ones, even deeper connections, but none that had required him to make a choice that would change everything. The idea of marriage had never seemed like something he would commit to, at least not in the traditional sense. He had always been the kind of person to go where the wind took him, never sticking around long enough to form lasting roots. But this was different. Zaira was different. He couldn't deny the way he felt around her. She was kind, genuine, and her beauty, both inside and out, was undeniable. And yet, he wondered, could he truly give her the love she deserved? He had his own life, his own past. Could he really build a future with her, on this distant world, knowing that there would be so many obstacles ahead? David walked through the fields outside Zaira's home one evening, trying to clear his mind. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the landscape. It was beautiful, serene, the perfect backdrop for reflection. As he walked, he thought about his life, about everything he had left behind on Earth, and what it would mean to start fresh on a planet so far away from everything he knew. He hadn't expected to fall into this kind of situation. When he first crashed on Zaira's planet, he had only been thinking about fixing his ship and getting back to his journey. But now, with each passing day, he felt himself getting pulled deeper into something more than just a casual acquaintance. He felt connected to Zaira, but was he ready to give up everything for her? Could he make a life here, with her, on this strange world? As these thoughts swirled in his mind, David stopped and looked up at the sky. The stars were just starting to appear, twinkling against the deepening darkness. It was a sight he had seen many times before, but tonight it felt different, more distant, more alien. It reminded him of how far he was from Earth, from everything he had known, and how uncertain the future was. He was startled from his thoughts when he heard footsteps approaching. Turning, he saw Zaira walking toward him, her figure bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. There was a peacefulness about her that always seemed to calm him, even in his moments of doubt. She smiled when she saw him, her eyes warm and inviting. "I thought I'd find you out here," she said softly. "You've been quiet today." David nodded, feeling a sense of guilt wash over him. He didn't want Zaira to think he was distant or unsure of his feelings for her. But the truth was, he was unsure about everything. His mind was full of questions, and he didn't know how to answer them. "I'd just been thinking," he said quietly, trying to put his feelings into words. "About what?" Zaira asked, her voice gentle. She took a few steps closer, standing beside him. She wasn't trying to push him, but the concern in her eyes was clear. She could sense that something was weighing heavily on him. David took a deep breath, looking out at the horizon. "I care about you, Zaira. I really do. But I don't know if I'm ready for this, for everything you asked of me." Zaira's expression softened, and she stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. "I understand," she said. "I didn't expect you to make a decision right away. I just needed to know how you felt. I don't want to pressure you into anything, David." He looked at her, his heart aching with the kindness and understanding in her voice. She had given him the freedom to make his own choice, but it didn't make the decision any easier. The idea of being with her, of building something real, felt so right. And yet, the reality of what that would mean, leaving behind his old life, his old world, was something he wasn't sure he could do. "I'd spent so much of my life on my own," David continued, his voice uncertain. "I've always been a wanderer, never staying in one place for too long. And now I'm here. And I care about you. But I don't know if I can make a life here. I don't know if I'm ready to settle down." Zaira listened carefully, her hand still resting on his arm. "David," she said softly, "you don't have to have all the answers right now. I never expected that from you. I just wanted you to know that I care about you, and that I'm here. If you decide that you want to be with me, then I'll be here, no matter what." David turned to look at her, the sincerity in her eyes making his heart race. She was offering him everything, her love, her trust, her future. And here he was, standing in front of her, unsure if he could offer the same in return. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the gentle breeze rustling through the trees. David's mind was still spinning. But in that silence, something shifted inside him. Zaira wasn't asking for him to be perfect. She wasn't asking for him to have everything figured out. She was asking him to be honest, to choose a path that felt right for them both. Finally, David spoke, his voice steady but soft. "I don't know what the future holds, Zaira, but I know this much. I don't want to walk away from you. I want to try." Zaira's face lit up with a radiant smile, and David felt a wave of relief wash over him. It wasn't the perfect answer, but it was the truth, and for the first time in days, he felt like he had taken the first step towards something real. Zaira stepped closer to him, her eyes filled with warmth and affection. "That's all I need to hear," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "We'll take it one step at a time, David, together." David smiled back at her, feeling a sense of peace settle within him. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it with Zaira by his side. The days after their conversation were filled with a quiet sense of understanding between David and Zaira. Both of them knew that things had changed between them. The connection was no longer just a passing curiosity or the bond of two strangers. It had become something deeper, something real. Yet even with this growing closeness, there was still a sense of uncertainty lingering in the air, especially for David. Zaira had given him the space he needed to think, to make the decision that felt right for him. She knew he was torn, still adjusting to the idea of settling down on a distant planet with someone like her. It wasn't easy, and she didn't expect it to be. But what mattered was that he was trying. He had come to her, and now he was willing to face the future with her. That was all she needed to know. One evening, after a long day of repairs to his ship, David sat by the fire outside Zaira's home. The stars were shining brightly above, and the night air was cool and fresh, a welcome change from the heat of the day. Zaira joined him, carrying a tray of simple food, her steps light and graceful. "How's the ship?" she asked as she set the tray down beside him. David sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. It's getting there. I think I might be able to get it running again in a few days. But I've been thinking, Zyra, about everything. Zira sat down beside him, her expression calm, yet her heart was beating faster than usual. She could sense the weight of his words. "What have you been thinking about?" she asked softly, her voice full of care. David hesitated, searching for the right words. He had never been good at talking about his feelings, especially when it came to matters of the heart. But tonight, he felt different. He felt ready. "I've been thinking about us, about this, about what you said the other day, about love, about being with someone who sees you, really sees you." Zara looked at him, her eyes searching his face, hoping for an answer, but not wanting to pressure him. "I know I've been unsure. I've never been in a situation like this before," David continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've spent my life moving from place to place, never staying long enough to make real connections. But you've made me feel like maybe I don't have to keep running. Maybe there's more to life than just surviving and drifting." Zara's heart skipped a beat as she listened. She had always known that David was different from the others, but hearing him speak so openly, so honestly, made her feel a rush of emotions she hadn't expected. It felt like the walls around her heart were finally beginning to crumble. "I've never had someone care about me the way you do, Zyra. And it's not just about being here with you," David continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "It's about what I feel when I'm with you. It's about the way you look at me, the way you listen to me, the way you make me feel like I matter. I haven't felt that in a long time." Zura's eyes softened as she reached out and took his hand in hers. "David," she whispered, her voice full of emotion. David squeezed her hand gently, then turned to face her, his eyes filled with sincerity. "I can't promise that it will always be easy. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I don't want to walk away from this. From you. You've made me realize that I don't need to keep running. I want to build something here with you. I want to try." Zyra's heart soared at his words. For the first time in years, she felt as though her hopes for love, for a real connection, weren't in vain. David hadn't just agreed to be with her out of obligation. He was choosing her, choosing to be with her, even though the path ahead was uncertain. "I don't need perfection, David," Zyra said softly, her voice steady but filled with warmth. "I just need to know that you're here, that you're willing to try. I've waited a long time for someone like you. I don't want to wait any longer." David smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that made Zura's heart flutter. "I'm here, Zura. I'm not going anywhere." As they sat together, the fire flickering in front of them, it was clear that they had crossed a threshold. The uncertainty was still there, lingering in the back of David's mind, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it had been before. Now it felt manageable, something they could face together. "I never imagined this would happen," David said, looking at the stars above. "I never thought I'd be on a distant planet, building a life with someone like you. But now that I'm here, I can't imagine being anywhere else." Zara leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace settle within her. "I never imagined this either, but I'm glad it's happening." David wrapped his arm around her, holding her close as they sat in the quiet of the night. The uncertainty of the future still hung in the air, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like an adventure, something they would face together. "I'm ready for whatever comes next," David whispered. Zira nodded, her heart full. "Me too." Together. The fire crackled in the background as they sat in companionable silence, the weight of their unspoken promises filling the space between them. They didn't need to say anything more. The future was uncertain, yes, but they had taken the first step, and that was enough for now. The days following David's decision were filled with a quiet sense of excitement. Zira and David had reached a new understanding, and though the future was still uncertain, both of them felt a sense of peace they hadn't known before. The connection between them had blossomed into something deeper, something real. Their time together had changed them both, and there was no turning back now. David had worked diligently on his ship, and now it was close to being repaired. The engine was running smoothly, and he could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. But even as he worked, his mind kept returning to Zira. The life he had once imagined for himself had shifted in the most unexpected way. Now, all he could think about was the life he could build with her. Zira, too, had felt the change in the air. Her life, once so quiet and isolated, now seemed full of possibility. She had always longed for love, for companionship, but she had never thought it would come like this, unexpectedly, and from someone so different from her. Yet, David had shown her a side of herself she had long forgotten. He had reminded her what it felt like to be seen, to be wanted, to be loved. One morning, as the sun rose over the alien landscape, David stood outside, watching the sky turn from dark blue to a soft, warm gold. It was a peaceful moment, the kind of moment he had never really taken the time to appreciate before. In the past, he had always been on the move, running from one place to the next, never staying long enough to feel like he belonged anywhere. But now, with Zira by his side, he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't known he was missing. "Good morning," Zira's voice called out from behind him, soft and full of warmth. He turned to find her standing at the door of their home, her face lit up by the early morning light. "Good morning," David replied with a smile. His heart warmed at the sight of her. She was more than just a companion now. She was his partner, someone he cared about deeply. "I made us breakfast," Zira said, walking toward him with a small tray in her hands. The scent of fresh food filled the air, and David's stomach growled in response. She placed the tray on the small table outside, where they had shared many meals together, and gestured for him to sit. David sat down beside her, and the two of them enjoyed a quiet breakfast together. They didn't need to say much. Just being in each other's presence was enough. For the first time, David felt like he had found a place where he truly belonged, a place where he didn't have to be alone anymore. "I've been thinking," David said after a moment, his voice thoughtful, "about everything. About us." Zira looked up at him, her eyes full of curiosity. "What have you been thinking about?" David paused, as if gathering his thoughts. "I've always been a wanderer. I never stayed in one place long enough to build a life. But now I realize that I don't need to keep running. I don't need to keep searching. I found something here, with you." Zira smiled softly, her heart swelling with affection. "I feel the same way, David. I never thought I would find someone who understood me like you do. I never thought I could have this kind of life, but now that I do, I can't imagine being anywhere else." David reached for her hand, his fingers gently brushing hers. "I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I want to face it with you, together." Zira's heart fluttered at his words. She had always feared that love would never be a part of her life, but now she could see that it was possible. She had found someone who truly cared for her, someone who wanted to build a life with her, no matter the challenges they might face. "We'll take it one step at a time," Zira said, her voice steady but filled with hope. "But I know this much, whatever comes next, we'll face it together." David smiled, squeezing her hand. Together. Later that day, David finished the final touches on his ship. It was ready to go. He stood back and admired the work he had done, the sense of accomplishment settling in. But as he looked at the ship, he realized that it wasn't just about getting it fixed. It wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about what came next. And for the first time, he knew that where he went, Zira would be with him. The ship was no longer just a way for him to escape. It was a symbol of the new life he was building, a life that wasn't about running away from the past, but about embracing the future. With Zira by his side, he felt ready for whatever lay ahead. Zira watched him from the door, a smile on her face. She had always dreamed of finding someone to share her life with, someone who would understand her, who would be there for her when she needed it most. And now she had found that person. She had found David. As the sun began to set, the two of them stood together outside, looking at the stars that had always seemed so distant to Zura. But now, they felt closer, more attainable. The future was full of uncertainty, but for the first time, it didn't feel so daunting. It felt like an adventure. And with David by her side, Zyra knew that no matter what came their way, they would face it together. David turned to her, his smile warm and reassuring. "We have a lot to figure out," he said, "but we'll do it together, right?" Zyra nodded, her heart filled with love and certainty. Together. As they stood there, hand in hand, looking up at the stars, they knew that this was just the beginning of their journey. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, and for the first time in both of their lives, they were no longer alone.